In this session, we will focus on the practical planning aspects of organizing and carrying out co-creation events. Using the GoNano project as an example, we will cover the wide range of tasks and other things that usually have to be arranged and sorted out in the preparation phase. In addition, we will also list the common practical requirements in terms of type of venue, technical equipment and other materials, and describe the variety of roles that usually have to be filled in order to carry out a co-creation event. Lastly, we will get into how to develop and use a detailed manual to ensure that the co-creation event is proceeding according to plan. By the end of this session, you should be inspired and enabled to start planning your own future co-creation events. When organizing any event, you need to prepare and develop your plans in good time. For a co-creation process, such as the one we organized in GoNano, planning is essential, as it consists of several interlocking steps where the results from one event is needed as the foundational input for the next events. Negligence and mistakes made in relation to one of the events can therefore end up affecting and jeopardizing the entire co-creation process. Thorough planning and preparation is one way to lower the risks of this. To exemplify how such a planning can be done and what it may entail, we will show and list the variety of tasks and other things we got in order at different points in the preparation phase for the co-creation events in GoNano. In GoNano, our preparation phase started about 5 months prior to the time when the first events in the co-creation process, the citizen workshops, were expected to be held. The first things to prepare were to choose the actual dates for the co-creation workshops, clarify and develop our budgets, and develop a strategy for recruitment of participants. Once those three were in order, we could initiate the recruitment process and prepare invitation letters for the possible participants. The recruitment of participants is just as essential as the planning itself. We will only scratch the surface of the recruitment part of the planning here, but that is because the next session goes in depth with the recruitment. As mentioned in the previous session on the GoNano Methodology, one of the methods used to prepare the participants for the deliberations was to provide them with background information beforehand. We already started developing this background material some months before the workshop. We had to start early to ensure that there were enough time to translate the material to the languages of the countries where the respective co-creation workshops would be held. We organized the venue and catering for the respective workshops, developed templates and instructions for reimbursement, and prepared information on how to reach the venue a few months before. When there were only a couple of months left, we planned for and recruited the internal staff needed to support carrying out the workshop and develop the evaluation forms for the participants, as well as communication and dissemination plans. Within the last month up to the event, the jigsaw should begin to fall into place. We started by updating our budget and finalizing the previously initiated background information material and the evaluation forms for the participants. In the next couple of months, we updated and prepared the final agenda and the template for the events. This is also when we started developing a detailed manual for the event. We'll get back to the manual a bit further on in this session. When the various materials were ready, we could start translating the material. When all this was done, we were ready to send the program and all the materials to the participants. Within the last 2 weeks before the event, we prepared templates for the informed consent and the presentations for the events, updated the list of participants and informed the venues about the actual number of participants. In addition, we prepared lists of attendance and signs to put up for the venue to help the participants find the right place within the building. In the last week before the event, we invited the internal staff to a briefing on the co-creation event and went through the detailed manual for the day together, to ensure that everyone knew what to do. Within the last days, we would go through our checklist for practical requirements and equipment to check whether we had everything, like extra copies of printed materials and name tags. We will elaborate on these requirements later on in the session. We also prepared how to follow up on the event in the weeks after it had been held. As soon as possible after the event, We collected the results and wrote up our notes while everything was still fresh in memory. Once this was in order, we would send a message out to the participants, thanking them for their time and input and informing them about the results of the event. We would also use the opportunity to remind them on how they could follow the co-creation process and continue to be engaged in it, for instance by partaking in later online consultations. Lastly, we followed up on the strategy of the communication and dissemination plans and with the participants to inquire about their learning from the experience. We do not argue that you absolutely have to do all these things when preparing a co-creation event, nor that the preparation phase necessarily takes 5 months. Every project is different, and so will its co-creation process and events also be. You must find a solution that is suitable to you. What you should take away from this walkthrough of a preparation phase is that regardless of the kind of co-creation process and or events you are envisioning carrying out, there are a lot of things you probably need to plan and prepare beforehand to make it happen. For the remaining part of this session, we focus on the usual requirements and roles to carry out a physical co-creation event and clarify what we mean with detailed manual. The venue you choose for your workshop is very important for the atmosphere you will be able to create. How safe and comfortable your participants feel will affect their contribution, which is why a good venue and appropriate catering are essential elements of a great workshop. So what makes a venue good and suitable? In our experience, the following requirements ensures the right setting for a physical workshop. Large open space with enough room for facilitators and X amount of people seated at tables. For our citizen workshops, we were a little under 50 people participating at the tables. Tables for hosting participants. The number of tables depend on the planning and final number of participants. We recommend a maximum number of 6 to 7 participants and a minimum number of 4 participants at each table. With regard to the type of table, we recommend to aim for round tables, as they allow for better conversation among all participants. A stage and or space from where the main facilitator can speak and be visible to everybody. Comfortable chairs. Hard plastic chairs might be painful for some participants after several hours. Remember that some participants might be elderly and some might have physical disabilities. Therefore, consider padded chairs and check accessibility, for instance for wheelchairs. Should have wardrobe facilities, a place to get food and drinks, toilets. The location of the restroom should be clearly indicated. In addition to lunchtime and other breaks, participants should be informed that they can leave the table to go for the toilets at any time. Outdoor facilities for those wanting to smoke or in need of fresh air. In addition to the venue, it is also important to ensure that the technical equipment and other relevant materials are prepared and in order. Which things that are required, of course, depends on the kind of co-creation event you plan to carry out, but the following are common ones. A computer for presentations, at least 6 notebooks for each table, pens and some USB sticks. A microphone and loudspeaker system, especially if you have many participants at your event. Big screen or monitor visible to all participants. A projector that is compatible with the computer. Good sources of light that ideally can be dimmed during the video presentations. Video recorder and a camera for documenting the event. Printer and copying machines accessible. Pin boards and pins. Flip charts with flip chart paper and markers for each of the tables. A variety of roles will usually have to be filled to carry out a co-creation event. Chances are you will need a little additional help with the facilitation of your co-creation event. The following descriptions are of the types of staff we used at the GoNano co-creation workshops. You might not need the exact same type of staff, but the ones we mention are typical roles to consider. A project manager. Her or his main responsibility is to make sure that the co-creation events, such as a workshop, runs according to the method described. She or he should have an overview of all tasks and make sure that everything is executed as planned. It is very important that the project manager makes sure that all other staff knows what to do. Alignment of staff and their roles can be a training day where all staff runs through every procedure of the co-creation workshops. A head facilitator. Here his main responsibility is to make sure that everybody in the room feels welcome and that all participants understand what to do at all times. The head facilitator will instruct everyone in the room about what to do exactly every time a new session begins. The head facilitator can be someone from your own organization or a professional facilitator hired to do the job. It could also be the project manager, but this is not recommended since the project manager needs to have the full overview, which can be difficult if you also have to facilitate. Table facilitators. Their main role is to function as a neutral moderator of the deliberations at the table, make sure that all participants are heard, that the participants focus on the assigned discussion theme, and keep track of time. Table facilitators should be neutral and should not participate in the discussion at the table, nor should they express an opinion on what is discussed at the table. The table facilitators need to be instructed carefully of their role during a briefing or training day. Make sure to engage some extras in case of illness. The table facilitators can be employees at your organization, but they could also be volunteers from various other organizations, or for instance graduate students. Note takers. You may have a note taker at each table, but to save on resources, you could also enroll the participants as note takers. Their main role is to record main points that are discussed during the session. A technician. This person makes sure that all technical equipment runs perfectly during the entire co-creation workshop. The technician must prepare and make sure to test all equipment before the event starts, preferably 1 or more days before. The technician should be familiar with the software and hardware that you choose to use. A media assistant. This person is responsible for undertaking media-related tasks during the co-creation workshop. She or he should take pictures and make recordings to visually document the workshop. Catering staff. The catering staff are responsible for serving food and drinks according to the workshop agenda. Their role during the workshop is also to clear the tables from food, plates and cutlery during the day. Depending on the size of your event, you can usually consider if some persons can cover more roles. When you have prepared the final agenda for the event and organized the venue, technical equipment, and necessary internal staff, it can be useful to develop a detailed manual. A detailed manual contains the planning for the day of the co-creation event and includes almost minute-to-minute instruction on who does what and when. It describes the materials needed for the workshop, the person responsible for collecting and bringing them, details on who will welcome the participants, and how they will be guided through the event. The aim of developing such a manual is to help ensure that everybody knows what is expected of them and that your co-creation methodology is followed. It can be used to help the staff prepare beforehand and to look up in throughout the day. In case some of the staff gets sick and you need to find replacements with short notice, the manual can help the new staff get up to speed and ready to help out. We recommend that internal staff is invited to a briefing on the co-creation day and go through the detailed manual together. Now you have gotten a presentation on the practical planning aspects of organizing and carrying out co-creation events. We covered the preparation phase for the first co-creation events in the GoNano co-creation process, elaborated on the practical requirements and roles for carrying out such an event, and explained how to develop and use a detailed manual. In the next session, we will focus on the recruitment of participants to co-creation events.